We're learning Perek Tes in Halacha in Hilchos Melochim, Halacha Aleph. Al Shisha Dvom Nitztav Adam Rishon. Adam Rishon was commanded on 6 halachas, 6 mitzvahs. Al Avodah Zorah, not to do idol worship, and Al Birchas Hashem, not to, God forbid, curse the Hashem. Al Shviras Domim, not to commit murder. Al Gilui Arois, not to have certain immoral relationships. Al Gezel, not to steal. Al Adinim, and to establish a rule of law. Even though we have this from Moshe Rabbeinu, that this is what Adam Rishon was commanded, and that's not to learn. That in logic would tell us that this should be the rule anyway. Miklal Divrei Torah Yireh she'al Elon Nitztavu. From the words of the Torah, we see that on these they were commanded. Noach was added another forbiddenness, Evim and Achai, to take a living limb from an animal, but that's forbidden. Shenema, as it says in Peirush 9, verse 4, that meat, while it's still attached to its soul, and its blood should not be eaten. Nimtzu Sheva mitzvahs. By Noach we have 7 mitzvahs. These are the 7 mitzvahs. The case of Mishnah cites Sanhedrin. Sheva mitzvahs Tava b'nei Noach. The b'nei Noach were commanded 7 mitzvahs, and dinim, law making courts, Birchas Hashem, blessing Hashem, idol worship, immorality, murder, stealing, and taking a limb from an animal. The Gemara learns it from the Pasuk, because in Bereshis 2:16 it says he was commanded by Maimonides. These are he was commanded. And he also brings on Sanhedrin 59b. That Adam Rishon was not permitted to eat meat, because it says that it should be for you to eat and to all the animals of the earth. Only vegetables were given to eat them, and man to animals, and not the animals to you. Therefore, he was not permitted to eat a living item. The Bnei Noach was permitted because it says that Noach, because he saved the world, he was given the right to eat animals. Even I would think he could eat even portions of them. Therefore, it says only meat that is alive you cannot eat. Therefore, you cannot eat a limb from a live animal. Because the Mishnah infers that Abraham and Achai did not have to be forbidden to man because he wasn't permitted to eat meat at all. So therefore, the 6 items that Adam Rishon had, we had to add to Noach, who was permitted to eat meat, not living portions of an animal. Sefer Lekutim brings later commentaries that they mention the Medrash in Dvarim Rabbah and Bereshis Rabbah. 6 things Adam Rishon was commanded. Noach had Evim and Achai, the Metzchias, Heights, Bereshis Rabbah, Shmeis Rabbah. The Ridvaz also brings from Sanhedrin, it's 56b, that we learned from Bereshis, the God was commanded to man 6 mitzvahs. They learn Evim and Achai from that when it says from all the animals from all the trees of the Garden of Eden you can eat, but not Evim and Achai, because there is a thought that the Adam Rishon Evim and Achai was forbidden. The Rebbe says that what's in the Rambam learns that Evim and Achai is only from that which was taught by Noach. Therefore, the 7th commandment is by Noach. Tosfos in Sanhedrin Nun Tes A teaches us that Evim and Achai is forbidden to Bnei Noach from Ochel Toichel, that you should eat. And the Machon cites the aim that even though Adam Rishon was forbidden to eat a limb because of what the previous passage that we mentioned, he had to forbid Noach, they shouldn't eat only because only the time that Adam Rishon was forbidden to eat meat, he was forbidden to eat Evim and Achai. Once Noach was permitted to eat meat, So Even Achai was also permitted. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to again explain that Even Achai remains forbidden, even though man can eat meat. Mashal cites the Yerushalmi that according to Rav, Adam Rishon was not forbidden with Even Achai. Now, Noach added the living limb. Kesef Mishnah says that the 7 mitzvahs is, we learn from Vayetzav Hashem Elokim es Odom, is only a nasmachta, meaning not a derivation, but something we rely on, and therefore we don't forego the statement of Yehuda in the name of Rav that Adam Rishon was not commanded to not eat a living limb. The Mishnah cites some Rashi and Toises that even though that was forbidden to Adam Rishon to eat meat, he was commanded about a living limb, that even if he didn't kill the Baal Chai, he's forbidden to eat it. In other words, even if he leaves it alive, he just takes off its tail or its ear. Because Rav is of the opinion that a person, Adam Rishon was permitted to eat a animal's meat that died of its own. It died, dropped dead. It's only forbidden to kill it, to eat it. The Mishnah questions the Sanhedrin that the forbiddenness of a limb from a live animal to Adam Rishon is learned from Peirush Sochal Teichel, and when it says from the later portion by Noach was permitted to eat crawling items, not like the Rambam that Ach Bosem and Avshagam Seichelu is talking about Evim and Achai. And Ochel Teichel is suggesting to rely on for our tradition. And he clarifies that in Sanhedrin we learned permission to eat rodents from Ach. But the main posuk comes to forbid Evim and Achai. In Hilchos, in forbidden food items, the Rambam writes, we have an accepted tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu, that you should not eat the soul with the meat, that Yisrael is forbidden to eat a limb that was cut from a live animal. And he adds, on a limb from a live animal, it says by Noach, that you're not allowed to eat it, that only Noach would seem, according to the Rambam, to be forbidden and not Adam Rishon. Even though that all of these are traditions in our hands because of Moshe Rabbeinu and they're logical, therefore it would seem on these the Torah tells us they were commanded. The Lechem Yehuda questions all the mitzvahs are Kabbalah from Moshe Rabbeinu. What's the difference from all the mitzvahs in the Torah that they're logical? He explains that the Rambam means to say here that for these there is no definitive statement like the Divrei Kesef Mishnah that Vayetzav Hashem Elokim and the others are only a reliance. If they were definite derivations, the Rambam would not say they are accepted tradition. They're accepted tradition. Mosdos first in the Rambam, where he says that the logic would seem to concur on these 6 items. That Adam was commanded, it would seem that the logic would obligate only them. Evim and Achai is not a mitzvah which is logical. No surah not to eat it, except if we were not commanded. In questions from Perek Ches, anyone who accepts the 7 mitzvahs and is careful to do them, he's considered from the righteous of the world. He has a portion of the world to come, and that's if he accepted them and he does them because God commanded him in the Torah and told it to us through Moshe Rabbeinu. The Bnei Noach were commanded to do so. But if he did it because of his own logic, he's not considered a stranger who dwells amongst us. He's not from the righteous of the world, only from the wise people. So it could be that a goy should keep the 7 mitzvahs, including Evim and Achai, because of his own logic, but not be considered keeping the 7 Noahide commandments. And he explains that there's mitzvahs that are logical, even though you're not commanded. And the mitzvahs that the Seichel by itself does not say to do them. But after they were given at Sinai, we can comprehend them. And the Chinuch writes in Mitzvah 452 that Eivah Menachai is forbidden so that we should not become accustomed to cruelty. The intent of the Rambam is that you can keep the 7 mitzvahs from logic after Chazal explained their reasoning. And the intellect seems to concur is talking only on the first 6. But the 7th is not so simple that it would have been understood by itself. Klei Chemda in Barzvayero explains that the Das would seem to say that all of the forbidden relationships, that automation was forbidden because what was forbidden to him? Only the wife of his father, his sister from his mother, and homosexuality and bestiality, and the wife of somebody else. And all of them are understood because of logic. But those that are forbidden only to Yisrael, there is no specific reason why they're forbidden to marry, for example, your aunt. That's just a edict. Now let's be Yeoman. The head of the Bezdin in Frankfurt the Main, cites from Sanhedrin, the Yisrael were commanded in Morah before we received the Torah by the bitter waters on 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. He cites Rashi that dinim in Morah we were commanded. That's why he explains the language that it wasn't already from Moshe Rabbeinu all these 7 mitzvahs before Kabbalah's HaTorah. Mechemdes Yisrael, HaMeir Dam Plotsky, cites from Sanhedrin that there are mitzvahs that were said to Bnei Noach and they were said again in Sinai, so in order that Bnei Noach should continue to be commanded with them. He explains that the intent of the Rambam is it's accepted by us from Moshe Rabbeinu to teach it to the Goyim. Peirush, he writes that Bnei Noach to ask to keep the 7 mitzvahs because HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded it in the Torah, and he told it to us through Moshe Rabbeinu, because before Matan Torah, the Bnei Noach already were commanded with it. Lechem Yehuda explains in the logic of the Torah, it would seem that these were within the words of Torah, they were commanded as well, because the Pesukim, the Gemara derives from the 6 mitzvahs are only a reliance, like the Kesef Mishnah said, or that it was repeated at Sinai, so that they would be obligated even after we received Torah, but they are obligated in the 7 mitzvahs. Rambam continues, so was the custom throughout the world. Ad Avram until Avram. Avram was added another mitzvah of Milah, for which Spalal Shachris. He also is enacted to pray Shachris. Yitzchak Hifrish Maisa. Yitzchak had the next mitzvah, so we have number 8 and 9, and he voiced it Tfilah Acheres, and he gave us Mincha. Livnoi Sayom, when the day is leaving us. Yaakov Yosef added Gid HaNoshe, which is the sciatic nerve that's forbidden to the Jewish people. Vispal Arvis, and he enacted Arvis. This is according to what it says in Brachos 26b, that the prayers were established by the Ovos. Here, the Rambam says in Mitzrayim, Amram had specific mitzvahs, and the Sus Avram explains it's Chuba v'Kedushin. It says, Vayerech ish me Beis Levi v'yikach, that a man of Beis Levi, which is Amram, went and he took the daughter of Levi. Sheba Moshe Rabbeinu, and then Moshe Rabbeinu came along, v'nishma Torah al Yesodei, that the Torah was completed through him. We had 613, but until then, we had the 8th, 9th, and 10th was Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, and Amram was the 11th, and at Morah there were 3 more. Actually, Rashi says there's 14, and then we had the rest of them were completed. That's what the Rambam says. Avram enacted Shachris, Yitzchak separated Meiser, and he added Mincha, Yaakov added Gid HaNoshe. The Rambam is of the opinion that the halacha is that the prayers were enacted by Ovos. Brochas, as in Brochas, there's a disagreement. Was it established by the patriarchs, or the Anshe Knesset HaGodol did it when we came back from Bovel, that it has to do with the offerings. That the Shachas is the offering in the morning, Mincha the offering in the afternoon, and night is connected the whatever had to be still consumed on the Mizbeach could be burnt at night, all night. In Hilchos Tefillah, Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph, he writes it's a mitzvah HaTorah to pray just once a day, and he's of the opinion that the three tefillahs Anshe Knesset HaGodol established that it should be the same as the offerings. Again, the first two because of the offerings, and a day with his musaf. There's another prayer called musaf because of the offering, the extra offering. And the first one is shachar, the second one is mincha, and the last one, musaf, is musaf. And one at night for the limbs that have been consumed on the mizbeach that were left over from the afternoon offering that weren't totally consumed. And we find a hint to this in Tehillim, chapter 55:18. So the three prayers, Erev, Boker, V'Tzoroyim, so the Malach says, evening, morning, and afternoon, I shall pray and beseech. Malach Abulafia. Questions that we here he writes that the Avos enacted it, and here he writes that the Anshe Knesset HaGodol enacted it. Is how do I know that tefillah is because of the offerings? Where does he get that? He cites a brisa in Brochas that seems to imply that Rabbi Shimon Levi his opinion is that tefillah is because of the offerings, and therefore he says the halacha is according to that brisa. The Gemara asks, there's a brisa like Rabbi Yosef or Rabbi Chanina that the patriarchs enacted the prayers. The Gemara explains that Rabbi Yosef or Rabbi Chanina is the opinion that the Avos enacted them and they relied on the offerings. Therefore, only according to Rabbi Yosef or Rabbi Chanina do we understand why the brisa is correct, and not like Rabbi Yeshua Levi. The Rambam should have said, like Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Chanina, that it's because the Avos did it because of the offerings. And he explains that really the Rambam is of the opinion like Rabbi Yosef and Chanina. Therefore he writes by us that Avram prayed Shachris and Yitzchak Mincha. The questions on the Kesef Mishnah, he says the Rambam seems to say here that Halacha is like that the patriarchs enacted the prayers 3 times a day, like Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Chanina, and by Hilchos Tefillah he writes that Allah like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Furthermore, he questions why didn't the Gemara question Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi from the brisa that proves like Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Chanina, and he brings the Mikroi Kodesh from the Yerushalmi that also Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is of the opinion that the patriarchs taught us to pray, but Rabbi Shimon Levi is that the patriarchs enacted it only for their time, and the Bnei Anshe Knesset HaGodol learned from them and enacted it for all generations. In actuality, time of tefillah is because of the offerings. Now we understand the words of the Kesef Mishnah, the Rambam passes like Rabbi Shimon Levi, that it has to do with the offerings. What it says in the Bryce is that they always enacted it, that's by itself at their time, not forever. And he says, he infers from the Rambam that Avram prayed Shachris, he took another one prayer in the afternoon, Yaakov at night, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the patriarchs themselves did it for their generations. But the Anshe Knesset HaGodol did it for the offerings. So therefore, you didn't have a problem with the Bryce, that Avram did Shachris on Rabbi Yeshua because he did it for himself, but not for all generations. The Marit Tzaoloin infers the Rambam, and that the enacted the number of the prayers should be like the number of the offerings, that they didn't enact. That was already previously, but they said when it should take place according to the offerings. But there's no proof that the Rambam passes like Rabbi Shimon Levi, because the Rambam says they said 3 prayers a day, and the Machon Nesher HaGodol made an order that it should be in direct time frame of the offerings. The HaMeir also explains that the time of the prayers was enacted for the offerings, but the prayers themselves were done by the patriarchs. Ivan disagrees with him that Yitzchak separated Ma'aser. Amar Avram. Ivan says what the Rambam says, that Yitzchak Avinu was the mitzvah of Ma'aser. Kain ha'yoroi loima. This was what he should say. V'hu Avram is Baal Shachas v'yifrish Ma'aser. Avram was the first one to take Ma'aser. Yitzchak was the one who added Mincha, because in the Rebbe, Avram took Ma'aser before Yitzchak. In the Kesef Mishnah cites Bereishis 17 verse 19. He gave him Ma'aser from everything. That Avram gave Ma'aser to Malki Tzedek, Melochim. Okay, when they were together, they got together after the war. Like Rashi says, Avram gave him Ma'aser, he gave him tithes from all that he was, because Malki Tzedek was a Kohen. Because the Mishnah explains that we don't find that Avram Avinu gave from money, but rather from spoils and Melochim of the king, because Malki Tzedek honored him when he brought forth bread and wine, and he blessed him, and he wasn't the concept of Ma'aser. He cites Bereishis Rabbo on the Posuk, Yitzchak Be'eretz who Yitzchak seated in that land, who he found in that year Shiurim, 100 times the amount. That means he had to give for Ma'aser in order to, he had to evaluate to how much there was to take a tithe. So Rebbe explains the question of the Rebbe. The Rambam doesn't say that he took Ma'aser did not explain that Avram took from the spoils, because Ma'aser in HaTorah is only with that which grows on the ground and not from possessions. And Yitzchak is the one who took it from possessions, from what grew on the ground, and Avram did it from the possessions that he took from the Melochim, from the other kings. The Migdal Ois says that this agreement with the Rambam and the Rebbe is a machlokes of Medrash. The Medrash that says that they always took tithes, and they would say that Avram gave to Malki Tzedek Ma'aser, like the Rebbe. The Cheskuni explains that the Rambam explains that Malki Tzedek gave to Avram, and so it would seem to the Migdal Ois, because from what Avram gave Ma'aser when he didn't take anything. He didn't take anything. Where did he have Ma'aser? He said, "I'm not taking anything. Yeah, I won't take from you from a string to a leather strap." And therefore, it must be that Shem ben Noach gave to Avram Ma'aser, the reverse. Not Avram gave to Shem ben Noach, but Shem ben Noach gave to Avram. The Cheskuni adds that Hashem took away the kahuna from Malki Tzedek and he gave it to Avram, because Malki Tzedek said first Baruch Avram before he said Baruch Ket Elyon. As we find in the Torah 32b, therefore Malki Tzedek gave Ma'aser to Avram. The Ramban explains that even though the Avram did not take from the spoils, but that which he gave, which he wasn't his to give away, because it belonged to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Ma'aser, he did give to Malki Tzedek. Yamder explains from the Avodas Yisrael, the Maggid of Koznitz, in the name of the Maggid of Mizrich, the Malki Tzedek drew forth with his holiness the Ois Hei to Avram. Therefore, afterwards they called Hashem, called Avram. And this is Vayiten Loi Maisa Mikoil, because this is hinted at where it says Maisa Mikoil. Koil is 50. Maisa from it is a hay, and Malki Tzedek gave the hay to Avraham. The Oyev Yisrael, the Afterov, he heard from the Maggid of Zlotshiv. He explains Vayiten Loi Maisa Mikoil. Avraham gave Maisa from the number Koil, that's the Ois hay. We've seen that Avraham gave Mais the Ois hay, not like the Maggid of Mizrich. Shem ben Noach gave it to Avram, the Ois hay. And the sources are in the Zohar Chodesh, in Parashat Lech Lecha, where it says, Vayiten Loi Maisa Mikoil, Rabbi Yitzchak says this posuk, I don't know who gave to who. But Baruch Hu gave Maisa, took one Ois, one of the Kisei HaKovod, and he gave it to Avram. Which letter was this? The Ois hay. Amei Rabbi Yehuda, Mikoil zu shchinosei shel Mokim. It says, yeah, Mikoil, that means the divine presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lechem Yehuda Nechsam Sofer explained that, clarified that the Rambam didn't write that Avram took tithes because he didn't give from that which grew in the ground. As we mentioned earlier, the Nechsam Sofer explains that Avram took from money. Like Yaakov, it says, everything that God will give me, I will give a tenth. And he said the opinion of that the Maimonides says the Midiraisa you have to give to poor people tithe even from profits. The husband is only, and to the owners is only the right to which poor person to give it to. The Shach here and there brings different opinions that the obligation of giving money. The Chaim Sofer clarifies that with the opinion that the obligation of giving tithe from money is Rabbananat, like the tithes of that which grows in the silo, and you put it in a silo. The silo is tevel if you don't separate from it. And he brings in a medrash, asa to asa. From here we see that you separate tithes to those who work at studying Torah. And that's not specifically those, but any mitzvah that's necessary, according to the vow of the person who sets it aside. When you bring somebody to Rambam, the Yaakov had to set aside Maisa, even from his children. And who was that? Levi was set aside. And he didn't separate Aniyim, only as a mitzvah in Kedusha. The words of the Ravid found in Psikta Rabosi that Avram gave, the first one who gave Maisa. Psikta Zutos, it says, Bocha Avram Avinu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Avram Avinu in the 10th generation from Noach that started to give Maisa. So it seems, I guess it means that Avram started to give Maisa. So he was the 10th generation that comes out according to that. Furthermore, in Parashat Lech Lecha it says he gave Maisa from Koil. Avram was the one who gave first. Therefore, his children merited to have Trumas Maisa, and not like the Avonos Kesef Mishnah in the Shittas Rambam that was Yitzchak who began. The Eiming HaMelech explains that Avram set aside Maisa, a tithe, to give to Malki Tzedek, but Yitzchak took Maisa that in order that his wheat should not be tevel. And certainly he enacted this mitzvah. Therefore the Rambam says that Yitzchak enacted Maisa, take off from the Tvua tevel. But from giving up what Avram gave, there's no proof to say that the Maisa is a complete mitzvah. I think 6 things Moshe was commanded. Avram had Milo was the 7th. Mitzrayim, Amram had others. As the Mishnah infers that only, and these it says were commanded, not on Maisa, not on prayers. Because according to the Rambam, the other mitzvahs that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov added were not commanded, and they did it by themselves. The Mishnah cites Omar Rav. Rav says Avram kept all of the Torah because it says, because Avram listened to my voice and kept my mishmarti, those things which have to be watched, my commandments, my edicts, and my admonishments. The Omar Rav, and Rav says, we say Rav Ashi, I would say it was Rav Ashi, that Avram Avinu even kept Erev Tavshilon, which is when Yontif is after, when Yontif is before Shabbos, so you have to make an Erev Tavshilon, because it says Toiroisoi. Toiroisoi is plural. There's Torah, not only Torah that's oral Torah, they're not only the written, but also the oral tradition. According to Rav, Lechem Mishnah argues that Rambam should have said that Avraham kept all of the Torah. And one cannot say that it says bris by Avraham, because only there he was commanded, because it says Yitzchak took off Ma'aseh. There's no place where he was commanded, and therefore, since he mentions what they kept as a custom, they should mention Avraham kept everything. He doesn't answer. The Moetzes Shmuel and Lechem Yehuda answer that the Rambam only counted what they accepted not only for themselves but for their children afterwards, till Matan Torah, more so than the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach. Therefore, Avram made Shachris, Yitzchak added Mincha, Yaakov made Meir. All of these prayed according to their father's minig, and they added another prayer. They bring some Tosfos in Brochus 26b. Avram prayed Mincha after the Yitzchak established it, because Avram kept that which Yitzchak established, and also Yaakov separated Ma'aseh like Yitzchak did, because it says when he said, "I will give Ma'aseh," Rambam doesn't mention it because it was done already by Yitzchak. Therefore, it's only counted these items that was accepted upon their children till the Kabbalah HaTorah. Brings to the Ramah in Tshuva Beis Siman Yud that the Bnei Noach were obligated to keep the dinim, that are, meaning laws between man and his friend, and not it can't be the laws that they chose on their own. Rabbi Yochanan learns that you learn the commandments of Bnei Noach from the Yitzav, that then the only obligation is to do what is the custom of the country, and not that which is the laws of Yisrael and Shulchan Aruch and Choshen Mishpat. The Ramah adds, it says, Ki yadat tiv, that I knew him, that Torah wasn't given, and he didn't have laws that were given in Sinai, and even so, he kept it, even Erev Tavshilon, which is oral Torah. And he kept the Torah mitzvahs even in the Abonon. Still, the rest of the people in his household only kept that which was accepted in their place as Minig Medina. And the Moetzes Shmuel proves this from only Avram kept it, and not the people of his household. Yaakov added Gid Anosha. So we see the Gid Anosha is only by a kosher animal. Abuda says there's Gid Anosha even by a non-kosher animal. He brings proof from the children of Yaakov they were forbidden the Gid Anosha, and we don't have a proof that Bnei Noach Yaakov only ate kosher animals because Torah wasn't giving it. Chacham said to him, by Sinai is when Gid Anosha became also, but it was written before, and that's how they answer that question. The Rambam codifies the halacha like the Chacham. The Gid Anosha is only by a behemoth Torah, by a kosher animal. The Mishnah questions, how did you write here that Yaakov added Gid Anosha? They will say that Yaakov only did it on his own knowledge. How did he know about it? And he remains with a question. Hilchos Melochim, Perek Tes Halacha Aleph, continuing the Redvaz, explains that the Rambam counted that Yitzchak added Ma'aseh, taking tithes, because you see that that's what he did, even though we don't find that he was commanded to do so. And also by Yaakov it says, therefore the Bnei Yisrael do not eat the Gid Anosha, even though it's forbiddenness is mentioned in Sinai, they did so even before Matan Torah. Therefore, the Rambam considers it counted here, and this explains the question of the Lechem Mishnah as to why Yitzchak is chosen. Moetzes Shmuel points out that the Lechem Mishnah didn't see what the Rambam wrote in Peirush Mishnah and Chulin, and give note on this main basis, which is found in this Mishnah, that was said in Sinai. It's forbidden because you know that everything that we are distancing ourselves or doing today, we don't do it only because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's commandment through Moshe Rabbeinu, and not because of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded to those that were before him. For example, that we do not eat Erev Menachai, not because it was forbidden to Noach, because the Torah forbade Moshe, told Moshe to forbade us to eat Erev Menachai. And so too, we do not circumcise ourselves because of Avram, but rather because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said through Moshe Rabbeinu we should do it on the 8th day. And we should do it as Avram did it. So to Giranosha, we're not doing it after the forbiddenness of Yaakov Avinu. This is a mitzvah of Moshe Rabbeinu. So we see that it says Tayag mitzvahs were told to Moshe in Sinai. Giranosha and Milah are part of them through Moshe Rabbeinu. So here you see that you don't have a sequence. Shmuel learns that the Chacham were also the opinion, like Rabbi Yehuda, the Giranosha, was forbidden to Yaakov. Ella, they have the opinion that you can't learn from that which was forbidden to Yaakov was even by a non-kosher animal, because it was really permitted to them. That we go after the forbiddenness that's forbidden to Yaakov only regarding that which Moshe Rabbeinu was told at Sinai, that it forbade an animal that's tomei, a non-kosher animal. Therefore, the Torah forbade Giranosha only in the behemoth Torah, because obviously, as a non-kosher animal, the entire animal is forbidden. Editors note, according to this, it's understood why by the mitzvah of Milah we make a bracha on the Milah, and only afterwards we mention because that's why Kodesh Baruch Hu said how to do it is through the mitzvah of Avinu. The Mishnah Melech, at the end of his words, writes, I found that Rae Mizrahi, somebody who agrees with him. The mitzvah that wasn't said in Sinai is not considered one of the mitzvahs. He brings the Lashon Rambam and Peirush HaMishnayos, that Lashon says, and he writes, I saw Rabbi Yafa Rabbi Feitoya, that certainly the Rambam paskins like Achomim, the Halacha is accordance with them, and they agree that Giranosha was forbidden to Yaakov. They disagree whether they don't eat it is because of that forbiddenness or because of Sinai. Could be that Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that we are forbidden to eat Giranosha from Sinai, and not because Bnei Yaakov were commanded, but since the Rambam said that from Sinai it was forbidden, therefore the Rambam wrote that way in the Peirush HaMishnah. But the Rambam Yehuda would admit that only that which is really commanded at Sinai is considered in the mitzvahs. That he did not disagree with the Hacham. The only question is whether he considers it as having been kept before. And then we learned before that the Rambam writes of Mitzrayim in Egypt, Nisava Amram was commanded by the mitzvahs. I guess the Mishnah questions, where did you learn this? The Vaz argues that it doesn't say what he was commanded. The Machon Shmuel cites in Soita, and it says, where did he go? But Rabbi Yehuda, that when Pari made the edict that every son who was born should be thrown into the Nile, Amram said, why should we have children if they're going to be killed? And he divorced his wife. Everyone divorced their wives as well. So Miriam told him, Daddy, your edict is worse than powers, because he only said on the males, your guys are also on the cavers. They should not have if you want to have wives, you don't have females either. Machon Shmuel proves from here that Amram divorced his wife beget. So he had a din of get. Miriam said to him, there's an obligation provable. It says in Soita that when he took Amram took Yocheved, he made her a chuppah. So we've seen this in the Gemara, the mitzvah that Avram was commanded was kedusha v'chuppah, Yerush and beget, mitzvah period v'rivya. And it seems that that's where it's from. If you'll say, how could you take Yocheved after he married? She was married to somebody else. That's all in Panoch, according to the Targum Yisrael in New Zealand in Bamidbar 11, verse 56. The Torah forbade one to take back his divorcee after she was married to somebody else. That part of Gittin, which has to do with divorce, that was not yet commanded to Amram. Now Moetzes writes, Amram took a Yocheved Kedushin Gemur Midiraisa. That's the mitzvah you say. It's just Kedushin. And Hayad Eson cites in Mechilto that they were commanded mitzvahs in Mitzrayim, besides the mitzvahs B'nai Noach. It must have been through Amram, who was the Godol, and therefore it says he was commanded other mitzvahs. The Chidor cites from the Machon Shmuel, and he argues, I don't know that it was commanded. With the commandment written, maybe he did it on his own understanding, and that because he was the Godol, others did so afterwards, and this was just a temporary concept until Kabbalah's HaTorah by Sinai. The Chidor disagrees on this basis that he divorced with a divorce, that he divorced Yocheved with a divorce. He questions from Shmoyes Rambam that Adam was given 6 mitzvahs, Noach 7th, Avraham 1, Yaakov 1. To Yisrael he gave everything. Therefore, we see that after Yaakov there were no other mitzvahs. Amram was commanded, the Medrash should have mentioned it. Therefore, the Chidor is he agrees and justifies the case of Mishnah, the question of the Rambam, and he did not answer. The Boston Rebbe used to say that we find Yisrael became Gedolim or Chayev Mitzvah, Bar Mitzvah at Sinai. So that we can add, if you count the mitzvahs that the Rambam counts, you have 6 mitzvahs to Adam, the 7th to Noach, the 8th to Avram, the 9th to Yitzchak, the 10th to Yaakov, the 11th to Amram, and 3 we had by Morah, so altogether 14. The Bar Mitzvah boy is 13 years and 1 day when his 14th year. And so it's very similar to what happened at Har Sinai. We have 14 mitzvahs before we received all Taryag mitzvahs.